Oh, what up, everybody? Do a little vlogging as I head back to the house. Went over to the duck shop today to talk to Mark about tuning this thing. And he's like, he only uses TuneBoy, which does not yet have bin files for this. They have not apparently cracked the ECU, so I'm just going to leave this bike stock for now. I'm not going to spend money on exhaust. Not going to worry about the tune. He's like, honestly, just leave it. He's like, if you're going to keep it, you're not worried about your warranty. He's like, here's the problem with all the tuners on the market. Even the ones that say, hey, we can return it to stock map for your warranty work. Apparently now the ECUs are to a point where it doesn't matter if you go back to the stock map. Yes, they can see that the map file matches what should be in there from the factory. But at the same time, they can also tell that it's been flashed. Even if you put it back, it shows how many writes. It'll show what it'll log, and it's all encrypted. It'll log what computer, a Windows laptop with whatever the Windows computer name is, connected to it on this date, blah, blah, blah. And they could see when it was written to. So he said, and he's a Ducati dealer, so I mean, he would know, as well as also being like one of the country's more famous Ducati pro shop tuner, engine builder, race team supporter, all that stuff. I mean, Mark is the shit. And so he's like, yeah, if you go ahead and flash that ECU and you bring it in for warranty work, one of the first things they're going to do is plug that thing in and see if it's ever been flashed. And if you've got a motor, you spun a bearing, something went wrong in the motor, and they see that you had flashed something to it, anything that was not done by the dealer, he's like, your engine warranty will be void, and it will be in the system, and any Ducati dealership you take your bike to, they're going to go in there and be able to see that ECU was tampered with. And so he agrees with like what Charles was saying, which was over at HFD1 last time we were tuning the Triumph. He's like, I don't think in the next 3, 4, 5 years you're probably not going to be able to tune bikes anymore. They will get to a point where these things will be encrypted, and because the government's cracking down on them, K&N, Harley, Dynojet, West Coast Choppers, or Jesse James Company, like the Diesel Brothers, like the government realized, hey, there's some good money and fines and restitutions to be made here. They're bringing in millions, cracking down on all these companies that are doing tuning on bikes, cars, trucks, everything really. That's, and the manufacturers are trying to protect themselves, because for a while the manufacturers are like, look, we manufactured the bike to be compliant with Euro 5, whatever. If someone takes it after the fact and modifies it, how can we control that? And they have plausible deniability. Well, now the governments in some of these countries, like the EU and stuff, they're coming down on them, California, saying, well, the fact that you don't lock these things down, that you allow them to be so easily bypassed and modified, we're going to hold you accountable. And so now they're like, well, shit, we're on the hook if someone takes our product that we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to figure out how to make it not lose power but meet emissions and noise standards, and then we sell it, and someone takes our product after the fact and monkeys around with it, and then we can get in trouble. So they're taking this stuff seriously, like cars every year. Used to be, you just go and buy a handheld tuner and load in a map, and in your Mustang or whatever, not no mo. A lot of times now it takes years because the manufacturers are getting really strict and getting good at encrypting their stuff, and eventually some programmer might crack it, but it sometimes takes years. And then, the next time around, they're going to make it even harder to crack, so it's kind of a bummer, because, if TuneBoy had a bin file for this, the TuneBoy is what Mark uses, he's like, I could put that thing up on the dyno, charge you $200 for the license, and then a couple hours of dyno time. It costs you $500 or $600, and I give you a nice custom map, and make sure it's unrestricted, give you better throttle response, fill in any dips in the torque from lean conditions because of the emissions stuff. But he's like, if I do that, you have a problem. Ducati is not messing around anymore, and other manufacturers are starting to follow suit, because ultimately the government pressures them by saying, if you allow your stuff to be easily put out of compliance, well then, that's going to be part of the compliance that we hold you to, is making sure that you put out vehicles that cannot easily be tampered with. And if you do, we're going to fine you. And so in an effort to cut down on customers and aftermarket companies still working feverishly to get around that stuff that they might then be held accountable for, the only way they can really put the screws to you and try to thwart you as the owner of the bike is holding that warranty over your head. Whether it's a Ducati that cost me $17,600 plus taxes and fees, or a new R1 is an $18,000 bike. A new Boost is a $20,000 bike. Nothing's cheap anymore. So if you go buy a new bike and you flash that ECU and the manufacturer says, okay, it's your bike. However, anything that goes wrong with the motor that isn't something obvious like, well, the radiator hose ruptured, it was a defective hose. Like, obviously they would have a hard time saying, well, your tune did that. But anything, you blow up your motor, crack a piston, you burn something up, any of that stuff, they can go, yeah, your warranty's gone. And that will deter a lot of people, because if you go, wait a minute, I got a brand new bike. Now if you're like me and you only keep a bike a year or so, maybe it isn't as big of a deal. But if you're the kind of person that goes out and buys a new bike and you're going to keep it 3, 4, 5, 6 years before upgrading to a new one, that could be a problem, because you got your 1-year warranty, and then you go and buy the extended warranty, as a lot of people who plan to keep their bikes for 5 years will go and do, and basically that warranty is now out the window. So it's kind of a shame, because the bike makers, I don't think they're being dicks on this. They get painted into a corner by emissions requirements, and they're like, we take a bike, we spend all this money to make this power, and then next year they're like, oh, you have to make it do this. And the only way to do that is to add more catalytic converters, more restrictive exhaust, more restrictive intake to reduce sound. They're like, we got to spend all this money, and then when you choke the bike up all that much to reduce the noise and the emissions, the bike loses power. Well, that's going to hurt sales, because people are going to be like, wait, the new bike makes 3 horsepower less than the old bike? Oh, and there's a price increase because of inflation? So they get put in this really tricky situation where they are required to hit these crazy targets. And if you got a cruiser and you're not worried about performance, but the problem is with performance cars and performance bikes, what's really good for making really good, strong, reliable power is not what's good for the emissions nannies. And what's really good for the emissions nannies is not good for big power reliably. So they have to do this, like walk a tightrope on a breezy day trying to get you as much power as they can so that you buy the bike, but they don't want to run afoul of the EPA or the EU, nor do they want to introduce warranty claims down the line because it was lean and caused some issues. So I don't envy manufacturers. They really are in a hard spot trying to do all the things that are required of them. And this is just an extension of that gets passed on to the consumer, is that inevitably at some point, if they're going to be responsible for what happens to their product years after the sale, then they're going to have to really take steps to make sure that I and you don't put them in a position where they're paying big hefty fines. And the only way to do that is encrypted ECUs and trying to make them near impossible to, what they'll do at some point is they'll probably install an eFuse. An eFuse would be some type of mechanism to where if you try to crack the ECU or access it, if anything other than an authorized dealer tool that has been on the network and validated, if anything other than that tries to access that ECU, it instantly trips a flag and bricks the ECU. And the only way to get your bike to start is going to be you got to trailer the bike to the manufacturer and have them go through a reset process that only they can do, and it's going to cost you money. That's where things are going to be headed, unfortunately. And it sucks as an enthusiast. But that's your government. They're going to have to take those kinds of steps. Or the second you flash that ECU, boom, they can see it. There's no way around it. You can't lie about it. You can't reset it to stock. Once it's been accessed by an unauthorized computer or source, bink, motor warranty void. And you go and, like Mark said, you go and spin a rod bearing or something, and they go, yeah, well, you flashed the ECU, and you know what? We don't know what you did. We don't know what was in there, so we're not covering it. And all of a sudden, you get a bill for $6,000 for an engine rebuild. It's going to make you twice about doing that just to get an extra 3 horsepower because you want your bike to be obnoxiously loud. I mean, and that's what it is at the end of the day. We want a little more power, but we want it loud. Well, because things are strict and putting a pipe on can make the bike run lean, which can risk damage, we have to tune it. The days of just slapping on a... It's not the 1990s, right? You can't just throw a pipe on it and then pull the carburetors off and change the jets. So they're screw-ins. Can't do that anymore. Everything's done through a laptop. Everything's done through a tablet. And there's always a digital paper trail. So that's going to be the world we live in for cars and bikes. The days of us being able to tune and kind of do what we want, and change the exhaust and do this and put a different cam and then tune it, those days are coming to an end. Will it be 3 years? Will it be 8? I don't know, but it's going to be relatively soon. And honestly, it coincides with the rise of EVs, which is going to render all this stuff moot anyway. Once the charging networks, we get a better battery pack and the charging network and all that shit gets to a point where you're getting 300, 400, 500 miles easily out of a charge, and you could charge here and there and be back on the road in 11 minutes kind of thing. You're going to get all the performance of EV, which blows combustion out of the way, out of the water. And you're going to have the convenience of being able to charge up anywhere, just like gas. It'll be measured in minutes, not hours. It's like, well... And at that point, you don't need to worry about emissions. You don't need to worry about that stuff. You know, maybe the manufacturer sells you a tuning package. Now, there's no tuning going on, and changing the tune doesn't change the emissions. It just means you're going to use up your battery faster. And so maybe other cars are going to come with a ludicrous mode like Tesla, right? You want to buy the extra, you know, quote-unquote turbo pack, where you'll lose 50 miles of range, but you pick up an extra, you know, 45 horsepower with the push of a button. So it sucks that these things are going away, but honestly, there's only so, I'm not going to get into all the politics of it, but and global warming and all that nonsense. But I mean, obviously, internal combustion's days, for most people, are numbered. And whether you believe in global warming or not, whether you believe we cause it or not, and even if we cause it, whether you believe we can do anything about it, these are all very complex arguments that are not settled and we don't really have the answers to. But let's just assume we did. All of us just taking fossil fuels and putting it into a box and exploding it and pushing all that exhaust fumes into the air that we and all the animals and all the plants breathe, regardless of whether it contributes to global warming or not, I don't think anybody can argue on either side that, well, it's a good thing, right? I mean, if you don't think exhaust fumes are all that big a deal, go start your car. Well, don't do this. YouTube, be very clear, I'm not telling people to do this. Let me rephrase that. You wouldn't go and start your car in the garage with the doors shut and go out and sit in it for half an hour, right? Because just sitting there for half an hour, inhaling the fumes of your one car, you will die. Obviously, exhaust is toxic. It's toxic to us. It's toxic to these plants that all scrub our oxygen. You want to call me an environmentalist hippie? No, I'm not. Trust me. I'm not on the climate change alarmist side. But obviously, inhaling exhaust isn't good for you. It can cause asthma and all other kinds of things. And you're just breathing shitty air. You know, they say we are what we eat. Oh, there's a joke in there. You know, you are what you eat. Nutrition's important. Yeah, what goes into your body is important. Do you drink soda every day, or you drink, you know, spring water? Makes a difference. Do you eat vegetables all day or cookies? Makes a difference. Well, why wouldn't you, what you inhale into your lungs? If you smoke, bad things happen. Your body's made to process oxygen and nitrogen. Not all kinds of harmful byproducts of internal combustion or fire. Well, that would be just regular combustion. You know what I mean? So at some point in our lifetimes, we are absolutely gonna have the end of internal combustion, and we're all gonna be sitting on... How the fuck do you do this? That's someone cutting in front of somebody else and not paying attention. So, felt my phone vibrating, which means my wife is probably trying to call me. But I got new gloves on, so I can't freaking feel my controls. Just have to break in. Gas up and then try to get home before I get rained on. So anyway, went over, talked to the guru, and he's like, you know what, dude? He's like, you know, you look at all those tablets and all these things and this service and Brentune, and yeah, if you're doing a whole bunch of mods and you tune it, you can pick up some horsepower. But he's like, honestly, he's like, in my experience, you fill in some gaps, you smooth it out, you make the motor a little happier, but you're not going to get tons of gains, at least on Ducatis. He's like, Ducati doesn't restrict the bikes the way a lot of the Japanese manufacturers do, where they close the throttle bodies early. And so with just a flash, with no other real changes, you know, You can go pick up 15 horsepower on the ZX-10R with stock exhaust. Just flash the ECU and tell it up near redline, don't close the throttle plates down to 59% or 59 degrees. Leave them open. He's like, those kind of gains can be had, but he's like, not really on Ducatis. He's like, now you go to Brentoon, you go to these other places, they're going to show you, oh, we got this result and that result. He's like, that's their marketing department. This is the guy who builds race motors, Ducati specifically, Ducati and MV Agusta. He's a super knowledgeable guy. He's 66 years old. He's been doing this for decades and decades and is a really famous Ducati engine builder and tuner. And he's like, there's just not a lot to be gained on these things unless you get in there and do some more work. He's like, a tune alone, yeah, you can smooth it out. But he's like, is it worth voiding your warranty? And if you have a problem and all of a sudden you get a bill for $5 or $8 grand, he's like, is that worth the 1.5 horsepower I might have gotten you? I'm like, you know what, dude? Thank you for being transparent. And that's why I like doing business with Mark. And that's what I like doing business with Huey. He put the bike on the dyno, look at it and go, dude, I can charge you $400 for 2 horsepower, or you could just save your money and go ride it and enjoy your bike. Have a nice day. You know? And I respect someone, you know, who's that honest that that's how they run their business. So anyway, that's today's little update. I got some watch reviews coming, and I keep saying I'm gonna stop buying watches, and then I've got a Tissot C-Star 1000 right there in that pack. I've got a Victorinox Inox coming tomorrow, as well as a new G-Shock. But then I am going to slow down. So anyway, I'm going to go. We'll talk to you guys later.